start and finish in one day our message on Obadiah, because Obadiah is only one chapter long. And Obadiah was interesting because Obadiah is a big, huge, long poem on justice, which kind of parallels what we talked about with Amos, but Amos's issues of justice related more to that which was going on in Israel rather than its neighbors. Well, Obadiah's work, Obadiah's prophetic vision relates more to the neighbors, relates more to Edom. And the story of Edom is that Edom has an interesting relationship with Israel because basically Israel was founded through Jacob and Edom was founded through Esau. And so they're two neighbors and they're competing and they're doing their stuff and they're basically brothers at odds with each other. And even though the Edomites really weren't that highly regarded themselves, they were always going after, picking on and attacking Israel because they were also a pagan nation. And so the work of Obadiah really teaches us, what do we do when we're dealing with opposition? How do we handle it? Does God know about it? Does God see about it? Like the kids were talking about today, is God still good? Is God good? Do we still serve a good God if we're being good or we're doing what we feel like we should be doing and we keep dealing with opposition? And how do we deal with those feelings, that lack and that anger and that frustration and that wanting to go and bring forth justice ourselves? Because a lot of times that's what we want to do. And we're in a very fleshly era of the church where if people are angry, they feel like they can lash out. And I'll give you a great example. When we did the service for the ordination this past weekend, when I was not here, we got locked out of the building because the leader had an attitude and was angry about something that nobody even did. Nobody even did anything. I'm going to guess she was probably picking up on stuff and picking up on spirits. And so instead of saying, you know what, I really wish I could help you, but I don't feel right about doing this. Let me find you somewhere else where you can have your service. Or, gee, I don't really know about this. Let me go see what I can do. They just locked us out of the building. But I said, you know what, we're not going to be in our flesh. We're going to get out of the car, and we're going to do the service right here outside. And we did it right there outside on the grounds. And I'm really grateful for that because we wound up using a whole bottle of my anointing oil, pouring over somebody's head. But I am really, it's a little bottle, I'm really very grateful that God still was able to move because I said, you know, we could get in our flesh and be mad and be upset and feel frustrated and whatever in response to that injustice, in response to that, and we could spend all day going back and forth on Facebook attacking each other and having a bad attitude and being nasty and being grouchy and being this and being that, or we can trust God to handle things and we can move forward with what we need to move forward with. So that means that the affirmation service for the apostle went forth, whether we were in a building or not. And I said that this also teaches me that we need to stop having this concept that we have about buildings. There was something I said, and I told all of them in the car, and I said that when Sanctuary first started, that you told me we cannot be people who go in everyone's house. We already know we can't eat from every table, but we don't associate that with going in everybody's house. And so we cannot be people that necessarily go everywhere and are received everywhere. And that was the reality that Israel was dealing with in this day, in this age. But people really feel that because they've been wronged, that they have the right to do something for somebody else. And so it's a poem here in Obadiah about justice, about things coming to an even fruition because of the things that other people have done. And Obadiah reminds us that our first purpose in ministry and our first purpose in the kingdom is to be focused on what God would have us to be focused on, because all this other stuff very quickly becomes a distraction. It becomes something that we can't handle. It becomes something that we cannot easily deal with. And we have to always make sure that we are stepping back and we are doing what God wants us to do. Obadiah's name means servant of God or worshiper of Yah or Jah or whatever word you want to use in there. And we know very, very little about him. Everything that's kind of known about him is legend or conjecture. We don't really know exactly when he lived, but it's believed that he lived sometime after the exile based on his message and the way he talked about Israel, maybe somewhere around the mid-5th century BC. In the Talmudic tradition, which is Jewish law, Obadiah was believed to be a convert to Judaism from the nation of Edom. And so then that gives his prophecy a very unique perspective, because he would have been somebody that experienced and encountered that issue firsthand. And he might have been a descendant of Eliphaz, who was one of the friends of Job. He was identified as Obadiah, servant of Ahab, and so if you go over and read about the abuses and the stuff that was going on in that time, he supposedly received the gift of prophecy while hiding the 100 prophets, that's in 1 Kings 18, during Jezebel's persecution. And then we've got Christian traditions that might have him born in Shechem around the 3rd centurion, sat out by Azariah against Elijah. So it's around the same time frame. The book is typically thought to be written about 586 BC and is very similar to the name in Arabic, which is Obadiah, and it's also related to the name Abdullah, in case you ever hear anybody who has that name. It's the shortest book in the entire Old Testament, in the entire Hebrew Bible, and it's based on this prophetic vision of the fall of the nation of Edom. And Edom, as we talked about earlier, they were mountain dwellers, and they were the descendants of Esau. And so we all know who Esau was. He sold his birthright for a bowl of porridge because Jacob was cunning and was crafty and was able to get it. And even though Esau was the older brother and had the firstborn birthright, Jacob, who was the younger brother, wound up getting that blessing from his father because he was willing to sell it. So the vision really addresses arrogance. It addresses a lot of issues that they had. And if you think about two kids fighting over daddy's affection or daddy's attention, you can really see it here. Among the nations, though, Edom was not highly regarded. It wasn't a group that everybody liked. It wasn't like Egypt or Assyria or Babylon or somebody that took everybody over, because those are things that often, when we get in that position, we esteem ourselves higher than we are. And so since Israel was viewed in one way, and Edom still might have been at the bottom of the barrel, they still regarded themselves higher than Israel. So let's start in verse 1, the vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, "Rise and let us go to battle." So rising for battle can be a spiritual principle as much as it's a natural one. Whether it comes to spiritual battle, we can really take a wrong approach. And that's what I think we are doing in this day and age, because we are so into the witchcraft stuff. And I'm not going to say that stuff is not there. I'm not going to say that witchcraft doesn't exist and there aren't people that aren't against us. But you know people who that's all they talk about. And every time they can have a headache, they can stub their toe, their hemline can come down. And they think that they're being spiritually attacked. And so we can get our focus off what it really should be and onto all these other things and fighting all these other battles, instead of really devoting ourselves to where we need to be. Because when we get in that mode, our whole focus is our enemies and how wrong we've been, how wrong they are, and how evil it is, and that we stop doing what we're supposed to do. In battle, you listen to your commander. You do what your leader and your commander tells you to do. Not looking, oh, there's an enemy here, or there's an enemy here, or there's a this or that, or da-da-da-da-da. So what has to happen is that we need to go from being all about righted and being made right and using spiritual warfare to crush other people. I remember when God really started showing me that all these people who are talking all the time about sending things back to who they came from or this or that, that's witchcraft too. You can send the demon back to hell. You can address the demon. But anytime we start bouncing all this stuff off of each other, it really starts to get ridiculous. I mean, if you really start to think about what's going on in church, all we're doing is transferring spirits back and forth to each other. And that's why we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing and why the kingdom isn't moving. Our spiritual warfare is to maintain the work for God. It is not to be distracted by all this different stuff. Okay, verse 2. See, I will make you a small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Pride can be a very serious problem, and so we need to beware the spirit of pride, which is what Edom had. We learned in the beginning, Edom wasn't highly regarded. They weren't liked. They weren't a group that had all these nations and people. I don't even know who their descendants would be today, if they even have any. But when we have pride, it becomes a problem, because I believe that God calls us to be balanced. I don't think that we should think that we're just a big pile of nothing, but I also think that we need to be humble enough to be able to interact with other people, and we need to not esteem ourselves as better than anybody else. There was a meme I shared on Facebook this week that said, I was raised to believe that you treat the CEO of the company and the janitor the exact same way. And I really believe that that's where we need to be at. We need to stop esteeming ourselves so highly, and that's a very common thing in church. This is my house, this is that, I'm this and that, I'm called to be this, I'm called to be that. Well, we need to remember that we're here to glorify God, and we are not here to glorify ourselves. And I remember catching somebody's name on Facebook, and they even had something, oh, loving me, or doing me, or this or that. You know, we don't need to have all that. It's not appropriate, it's not becoming, because God can always bring us right down, back from where we came from. God can just dump us right off that little pedestal we build and leave us where we are, because the proud don't have anything to await them. There's nothing good that's coming for the proud. Verse 4, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few leaves? But how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread, it will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. So things can come upon them that they won't detect, and that's how warfare works. If we're really trusting God to do something, that means that we may not necessarily see the results of it immediately. There are people that we all know who really, according to the world and according to the law, have not been treated justly. Not even remotely, not even a little bit, that keep seeming to get away from things. But when God deals with it, it'll matter. And it will be something that will not recover from. And that's why spiritual warfare is so important, because we can worry all day long about everybody and everything else around us. We can worry about our enemies in the natural. But if we believe that God is for us in the spiritual, that means that we have things that we need to do. Verse 7. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, men of understanding in the mountains of Esau? You warriors, O Teman, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. In looking at that, we are very carefully warned against those who are needlessly violent, against people who really have no reason. And I like what they did in this passage. I like the vision, because it talks about attacking your brother, about being violent against your brother, when we need to realize that we do this every day in Christianity. You know, we're also brothers and sisters in the Lord, in the church. And so when it's saying about being violent against our brothers, we need to think about how we treat others in the kingdom, how we treat our brothers and our sisters. And are we violent? Because there's that parallel there between Esau and Jacob. Well, there's a parallel between us. And you know what? We understand, and we fail to celebrate and encourage another when we win, and help another when they fall. We want everybody all the time to kind of revolve around us or see it from our perspective, and that's why we are called to work with other people, because it's like I say, it creates a reasonable doubt. You know, sometimes we don't all agree about things, and that's why we're supposed to talk to other people and think about it and see things from different perspectives. But we let our flesh get in the way. That's why we have so many denominations. That's why we have so many different churches. That's why you can have a church with 20 people, and a church with 2 people, and a church with 5 people, and in theory everybody should get together, but we can't celebrate each other, and we can't seem to figure out with one another that this is our brother and our sister, because everyone wants to know, well, who's going to be in charge? Well, who's going to be this or that? Well, if you have the fivefold ministry, somewhere in there you figure that out. Somewhere in there you're able to figure that out. But we got people who claim to be pastors who are apostles, and people who claim to be evangelists to be prophets, and people to be this and that, and we have so much confusion we don't know who is who. So we need to take the pride and the flesh out of it, because Things like this are just shameful, being needlessly violent, stealing, being angry, being at odds, and there are a lot of different ways that we steal. I talked about that in the message I preached for the ceremony for the ordination, because I talked openly about the fact that we deal with the wise and the foolish virgins, and that there are people in our lives that come along and they're stealing from us. They are stealing what God has given from us because we are giving it to them. We are wholeheartedly allowing them to do it, and then there is nothing left over. And so we need to stop looking down on people when they go through, because God's judgment falls when it falls, and it does still fall. And we need to not get it in our minds that we are exempt from anything, because very easily we could have to deal with it ourselves. Verse 12, you should not look down on your brother in the day of misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor look down on them in calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. Pause and think about that. So in other words, weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And that's part of esteeming, not to take advantage of where other people are. Verse 15, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head, just as you drank on my holy hill. So all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they never had been. We reap what we sow. It's right there, and it's all throughout the Bible. It's all throughout biblical principle. It's probably one of the most important biblical principles that we can learn. Whatever we're doing will come back. It will be done to us. People call it all different kinds of things, but our deeds will recompense what they have earned. And if we are believers, then we really need to believe that. That's part of why it is so important for us to conduct ourselves properly, and for us to conduct ourselves in a right way, because whatever we sow, we will reap. And sometimes it means we have to sow for a long time. Sometimes it means we have to sow. We have to trust God. And when I say sow, I'm not just talking about money. Money is a part of that, but it's also about our actions. We sow with kindness. We sow when we extend mercy to somebody. We sow anytime that we're doing something that pertains to godliness or to ministry. We are always constantly sowing something in our lives. And so that means what we put out, we're going to get back. And so, what is it that we wish to get back? Verse 17, but on Mount Zion will be deliverance, it will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance. The house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. The house of Esau will be stubble, and they will set it on fire and consume it. There will be no survivors from the house of Esau, the Lord has spoken. Fire is often used in the Bible to indicate purification. A lot of us associate it with hellfire, but that association comes from purification. When the plague hit in not the 1700s, when the plague hit in the 1300s, way before that, what they used to do was burn the bodies, because the bodies were contaminated with the body fluids from the plague, and it was still contagious after people died. And so they burned the bodies. That's where Ring Around the Rosy, Pocket Full of Posies, Ashes, Ashes, We All Fall Down comes from. Every time you see the little kids singing that, they're singing about the plague. They used to put posies in the pocket because the body smelled, ashes, ashes, burning the bodies, we all fall down, because the people were dead. And so that's what that's about, and now you'll never hear that song the same ever again in your life. But the reason why sometimes we burn, why they use a refiner's fire, is because it purifies metals. They turn it up really hot, and it burns off any of the excessive stuff, the dross, or whatever the impurities are, and then you've got perfect gold. And so fire is used as an image of purifying. That's why the Holy Spirit is represented by fire, by tongues of fire, that there was a purification that went on in those people because they had received the Holy Spirit. And the same is true here, that the fire, that the flame, that the burning is going to get rid of whatever is there that is impure. And so the house of Jacob is spoken of as being a fire, and they're talking of there as being a remnant, which we talked about with Amos, which I think we even talked about with when we did Hosea. The concept of the remnant is very poignant there, because The remnant will stand as a purifying agent, as a purifying force, as something that will consume and change where it is, everything that's around it, and it will spread and it will go. Verse 19. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and the people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israel exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in Sepharad will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. So that promise is there once again of that refuge, of that safety, of more or less kind of that place of perfection shall come forth. And that's a recurring theme in prophecy. After the prophecy is given and it says this is what shall happen, this is what shall result. And somewhere in here what we do is we put everything together, because in order for the kingdom to be the Lord's, there cannot be any impurities or any improper things therein. And so what we stand and we say is that we want to be these people that God holds accountable, but that we are accountable now. Because God is going to hold everybody accountable, even those who don't want to be. And so what God is calling us to do is to be His soldiers in His army, and to be accountable for the work that He wants to do within us now, and so that we can be the people that are there to usher in this new time and this new era in the house of Joseph.